welcome to my channel on the best of fantasy. One thing we fantasy fans adore is being immersed in a world that a beloved author creates for us. Whether it be for just pure escape or to work out real world issues through the psychic distance that an imagined world can offer. We engage with all kinds of worlds in this genre. It is one of the beautiful strengths of fantasy that it offers so many worlds for us to explore. And so I'm going to share with you my top 10 fantasy authors for the amazing world building that they do. Now, this was a very tough one, and obviously I'm keeping this to fantasy, so no, Dune will not be mentioned here. This is hard enough without any genre crashing going on, although actually Dune is kind of sort of a fantasy with science fiction trappings, but we won't get into that. We're not doing science fiction here, we're doing fantasy, and I have so many honorable mentions. I guess that's what we're calling these. Just my shout out to so many great worlds, so many amazing worlds. These are worlds that simply awe me and amaze me and give me a sense of wonder. These are worlds, some of them I don't really want to go to, and some of them would be my idea of heaven. But let me just share with you some of my honorable mentions here before I get into the top 10. One of which is going to be R. Scott Baker's Earwa. This is one of the worlds I would not particularly want to visit. It is bleak and harsh and difficult, and in many ways, the world here is very much based on the kind of Crusade era of Europe, but it is far grittier than even that, if you can imagine that, I think. So it's just an amazing accomplishment, though, on Baker's part, giving you a sense of that crazy place, Earwa. It will always stick in my memory. Next on my list of honorable mentions is going to be John Guin for his amazing worlds that he builds, including the Banished Lands in The Faithful and the Fallen and in Of Blood and Bone, and of course Vigrid in the Bloodsworn trilogy. This is a place I might like to visit, although I would have to be careful to avoid certain entities. But it's just a place of such imagination, and I just love the time that I've spent in the Banished Lands. And Vigrid reminds me of just an Icelandic saga. I feel like in the sagas that no fantasy author has come as close as John Gwynne, in my opinion, to the feel of the Icelandic sagas in the Bloodsworn trilogy. So yeah, he belongs on this list. How about Fonda Lee in the Greenbone saga? I mean, Janloon particularly for me is a vivid setting. A city that is a personality in and of itself, a major player in the story. I just loved getting to know that city especially, but all of Kikon as well. So wow, just so many great worlds here. How about Mark Lawrence? This is an author who's created several amazing worlds for us. You have the World of the Broken Empire trilogy and the Red Queen's War trilogy. You have perhaps one of my favorites is Abeth in the Book of the Ancestor. This is amazing. This is a dying planet sort of story where there's a narrow strip of land that is kept free of ice. Really bleak, really cool, really otherworldly, and his blend of fantasy and science fiction in this tale is something to behold. How about Stephen King? My goodness. I mean, what about the multiverse? I mean, a lot of people would put King on their list among the top 10, but this is such a stacked in this genre. Stacked thing. This is honestly maybe the hardest of these videos I've made so far in this series of the best of fantasy videos that I'm making here in order to add a little nuance to the top 10 format that we have here on BookTube. But yeah, I mean, this has got all kinds of worlds in it. The Dark Tower series, and I know that many of his other books, which I've not read, do connect with the Dark Tower. So you've just got an amazing. I mean, in the Gunslinger alone, you've got this crazy, bizarre world that you're introduced to. It has the feel of a Western, but he also blends fantasy and science fiction and apocalyptic literature, all kinds of stuff in these amazing tales that he has woven for us. And how about Daniel Abraham? I mean, this is an amazing, The Long Price Quartet. The Kayate is an incredible creation with their very own way of communicating, which does to some degree exist in the real world, but not maybe to the extent that you see it in Abraham's Tale, where you have communication happening verbally, but all also through gesture, and that is really quite a nice touch on here. Just a vivid world. I really enjoyed my time in the Kayate and the other parts of the Long Price Quartet. A book that I don't have with me because at the time I read it, I was using the library, but I also want to mention, shout out to Lev Grossman's Fillory, which is the world, or worlds, if you want to call it, Fillory in The Magicians and that trilogy. I mean, that world is sort of like Narnia on heroin, I guess you could say. And it is really quite something what Lev Grossman achieves, particularly at the end of the trilogy. You really see it just kind of blow up there in the most amazing way. And speaking of Narnia, how about Narnia? C.S. Lewis's world that he created for us, his portal world. And a lot of people would count this among their very favorites with a whole lot of affection. And then, of course, what about Josiah Bancroft's tower in, the books of Babel, the Tower of Babel? What a crazy thing he has created in this multi-layered, simple encapsulation of our broader society, our world. He captures so many great themes through the symbol of the tower itself. And it is quite an experience going through the tower with the characters, witnessing the absurdity that is humanity. So yeah, I mean, these are all fantastic. I mean, I could go on and on and on with these honorable mentions, but I need to get to my top 10. So let's get into it. And I will begin with number 10. Tad Williams with Austin Ard is the world of the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy, which begins with the Dragonbone Chair. Now, Tad Williams is an author that I read long ago, quite a long time ago, probably closer, maybe between 2 and 3 decades ago, I would say. I read this trilogy, but it sticks with me. So much of this is very much an analog to Europe, particularly Western Europe, but you have a kind of an area that is like the Roman Empire, or the vestiges of it in its decaying days, let's say. You have areas that are reminiscent of Vikings, and there's areas with more Celtic vibes. You even have some Inuit type vibes going on, but it is the underworld, if you will. It is the layers that are literally beneath the present that most haunt my memory. And if you've read the trilogy, or really it's a tetralogy, but we won't get into that. But if you've read it, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. There are older civilizations than the human ones that exist in this world. And there are moments that touch on these older civilizations that really, really have stuck with me and that move me. And I love Williams' treatment of that particular theme, let's say. The vestiges of the past, the civilizations that were, the sort of Ubi Sunt theme. Where are the ones who came before? Or the idea that there were civilizations before ours and they are now gone, but there are still echoes of them. Williams does a really brilliant job with that theme. That is a favorite. That is a staple of fantasy, of course. Many of the authors I'm about to mention use that same thing in order to add layers and layers to their worlds and make us feel that immersion, make us feel the reality of these secondary worlds, these sub-creations, as it were. So next on my list is going to be Robin Hobb with the world of the realm of the Elderlings, which I guess is sometimes referred to as the world of Ida and El. Those are the goddess and god of some of the people in this world, at least. But of course, the Six Duchies is an area that most fans would be enamored with in many ways. But you also have Bingtown and the Rainwilds. There are so many different locations in this wonderful series that become very dear to the fan of the series. And I am certainly counting myself as one of them. And this is a world where I would like to explore, but she also gives us a sense of the past, and that is something that unfolds as the series progresses. And a shout out to the Rainwilds Chronicles in this case, because it is kind of the ugly stepchild or whatever of the realm of the Elderlings in many cases, but actually a lot of the coolest world building happens in the Rainwild's Chronicles. So it is a part of the realm of the Elderlings that I certainly would advocate people pay close attention to. Some really cool stuff unfolds. The world building is really center stage in the Rainwild's Chronicles in particular. So let's move on. Where's my next world going to be? Where am I going to go next? Well, let's go to Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. This is a world that I love to return to. Now, there are some horrible things that happen here, as in every other world, but it is a world of great beauty, of great wonder, which is realized through the majestic, beautiful prose of Ursula Le Guin. I just cannot say enough about the beauty of Earthsea, how I always feel that I'm coming home when I read any of the Ursula books. It's just a fantastic thing. Partly because of nostalgia. This is a series I read in my youth, but also I just think that her ability to conjure a world with the fewest amount of words of all these authors, I think she's the most economical as well. She doesn't really do a lot in terms of describing things. She's actually fairly low on description, but somehow with just a few words, she's able to give you this sense of an entire world that is lived in and beautiful and has soil and water and everything. I mean, it's just a tremendous achievement. I wish I could write like Ursula Le Guin. My goodness, to do that is just tremendous. Well, how about Brandon Sanderson? Now, I think a lot of people would probably put Brando Sando as their number one, and I won't argue with that. But for me, he is number 7. I've only read about a couple of his worlds, one being Scadrial, which is the world of Mistborn, and Roshar, which is the world of the Stormlight Archive. And I am deeply impressed, deeply impressed. I think that is one of Sanderson's greatest strengths, honestly. In addition to his magic systems, I think he's a great world builder. I think he does some really cool stuff. Obviously, he enjoys creating worlds and the whole Cosmere thing. Now, I obviously, having only read those 2 series, I'm not a Cosmere expert by any means, but I do have an appreciation of the vastness of the Cosmere and all the different connections that Sanderson makes. Very cool, and I know his fans love it. And so, yes, Brandon Sanderson, I believe, deserves to be in the top 10 for just about anybody. Well, maybe some people wouldn't, but he's in my top 10 for sure, and I know many people would put him as number 1 even. And a world that actually Sanderson contributed to in a very important way is Robert Jordan's world that he portrayed in The Wheel of Time, because Sanderson finished out that series with books 12, 13, and 14 of The Wheel of Time. But it was Robert Jordan who created this world, as sometimes affectionately known by its fans as Randland. It's not official, it's not mentioned in the books, but the world is not given a name. The many kingdoms that the story takes place in are sometimes referred to as the Westlands, I believe, so that perhaps you could use that. But whatever name you use, there are just so many, amazing, diverse kingdoms in this world with their own cultures, with their own clothing styles, and you name it. It's steeped in history. There are layers and layers. It goes back thousands of years. It is really cool what Jordan has achieved in The Wheel of Time in terms of building a world. Obviously, he spent a long time lovingly portraying this world, and that is one of the great strengths of The Wheel of Time, in my opinion. Wow, so those giants of the genre are even in my top 5. So who could be there? Who could be there? Well, how about Janny Wurts in the Wars of Light and Shadow? Athera is where most of the story is taking place, but there are other worlds beyond that as well, and I'm only 5 books in at the moment, so who knows if I were daring enough to make this video again at some point. Maybe she will even climb on this list for me, but at the moment I'm putting Janny Wurts at number 5. Athera is incredible. Talk about being steeped in history and lore and myth. There are also even little short stories that she's set in this world that add even further to the sense of history. And it's just a tremendous, vast thing that Janny Wurts is doing here in this amazing 11-book series, which is going to be complete as of May of this year, 2024. So very excited to continue on in this series, to read the rest of it. It is just a tremendous achievement. And I am in awe of Athera and its environs in this beautifully portrayed series. And then how about George R.R. Martin in A Song of Ice and Fire, giving us Westeros and Essos. And I know there are a couple continents besides those. There's a North continent and a South continent, I believe. But I'm not sure the world has a name. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the world it's just the world, I guess, is what it's called. But it is also another analog in some ways. Westeros particularly being very much like not just Europe, but you could even say like the England of, say, the 15th century during the Wars of the Roses, or recovering from the Hundred Years' War. Martin does borrow a lot from his history, and he knows it well and does a great job of making his world alive and vivid. But some of the fantasy elements that he injects into this world, tremendous. How about a wall of ice that is several hundred feet tall? Wow. I mean, that's just amazing. I mean, this is a guy with an imagination. And I think those of us who love this series love being steeped in this world that he has created for us. It is a fairly bleak world in many ways. There aren't many happy little inns where you can hang out. They're fairly run-down places, flea-ridden and shabby and dangerous for the most part. So yeah, I'm not sure how much time I'd want to spend in Westeros, but I'm fascinated by this world. As brutal as it can be, it is a tremendous achievement that George R. R. Martin has given us in this series. Incomplete, obviously, so that is sad, but I will never regret having read the 5 books in the series that do exist, and who knows, maybe, well, I guess I won't make any bets on that one, but I am so glad that he wrote what he did write. Well, now, my goodness, so we're down to the final 3. Who could they be? Well, if you're a lover of this channel, if you're a follower of this channel, you probably know some of the names I'm about to mention, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. So here we have at number, really, these are tied because they are co-creators of the Malazan world, or as the fans may call it, Planet Wu. Now, I can't explain that because it is kind of an inside joke, but it's an inside joke that comes with spoilers. So if you know it, you know it, but you really would have needed to read Esselmont's Path to Ascendancy series to get that, I think. And sometimes we, people who do a lot of Malaz tubers, we'll even call ourselves Wu tubers. But yes, enough of the inside jokes. These two have created a tremendous world. We call it sometimes the Malazan world, but there's a lot more to it. The Malazan Empire is just one part of that world, which exists primarily on one continent, but it has its fingers on other continents as well, and which is part of the story, really, frankly, because it is an expanding empire in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. But yeah, I mean, this is, oh my goodness, the various series that are set here. I'm holding up Stephen Erickson's Fall of Light, which is book 2 of the Carcanis trilogy. This is the prequel trilogy that takes place, a couple 100,000 years before the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Yes, I did say a couple 100,000 years. That is giving you a sense of the scale of this world that these two created together. And yes, they did create it while gaming using GURPS, but the books are not really, they don't, to me, at all really have the feel of books that are based on games. They're not RPG style books, in my opinion. They are works of literature that happen to be inspired by a world that these two created while they were gaming. Most of the stories are independent of whatever gaming they did, but some of the characters, not all, but some of the characters they created while gaming. But they have been put into these magnificent tales in this fully realized world with diverse, I mean, talk about diversity, lots of different continents, lots of different peoples. You've got races that are elder races that are far older, like the Tlan Imas, for example, or the Kachain Chamal. I mean, you've got dinosaurs with freaking swords for arms. You've got all kinds of stuff going on here. This is a world full of just all kinds of diversity. And it is a place that is ripe for great stories as well. I mean, I just love my time. I consider all these Malazan series put together to be the greatest literary journey of my life. It is just tremendous stuff. But that said, it is not my number one when it comes to world building. The world builder, the fantasy writer who gives me the most sense of wonder and beauty and awe when I'm immersed in his tales is none other than J.R.R. Tolkien, author of The Lord of the Rings and, of course, The Silmarillion and The Hobbit and so many other things set in Middle-earth, which, I wouldn't mind if heaven looked exactly like the Shire. If there were a heaven, for me, it probably would be the Shire. So yes, this is going again back to my youth, an author who ignited my imagination, who baptized my imagination, who made me long for more tales set in places of wonder and beauty and peril and everything else. I mean, this Middle Earth was when I first was awakened to the idea that great stories could happen in imagined places, but that those imagined places would affect the way I see the world around me. And so I am always going to be a great admirer of J.R.R. Tolkien. And though the road goes ever on and on, I will always return to Middle Earth. And so those are my top 10 fantasy authors who awe you with their world building. I would love to hear about your favorites because this is just my list. It is not an official list. It is by no means, even for myself, written in stone. So I'm sure I will encounter more fantasy worlds. That's why we love this genre. There's so many of them. So hopefully I will have more that will contend for a place among my favorites. But I'd love to hear about yours. And if there are some I didn't mention that you think I would really enjoy steeping myself in, please leave a comment. And that's it from me for now. Until next time.